Welcome to the Party Lines. Today we'll be joined by TV host, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and president of AmberMac Media Inc., AmberMac, to discuss why Canadians need to pay attention to the rapidly changing world of technology. But first, Prime Minister Mark Carney weighs in on defense spending and whether Canada is prepared for a more dangerous world. Take a look.
For the last 10 months, Canada's new government has been working with unprecedented speed and scale. In 10 months, we have invested over $60 billion in our defense and security. That's the largest year-on-year increase in defense investment in generations. And as a result of these efforts, this morning, NATO confirmed that Canada has achieved its 2% defense expenditure target, half a decade ahead of the original schedule.
So the government is doing what they're supposed to do. That's the way I view this.
Okay.
It's an announcement about, hey, we did what we're supposed to do.
I think it's so monumental because we weren't even going to reach our spending, right? And it was a really long road to kind of get here. But I think when our sovereignty is in question, when all these things that are triggered by, world affairs, economic wars, we have to look at really standing us up, on our own rather than being reliant.
They got us there, which I never thought was going to happen. But we also went to internationally and committed that this is what we're going to do. It's 2%. And then we said, that's probably not going to happen after we said it was. I don't blame countries like the U.S. saying, like, you all have to contribute or you're not part of the gang.
Right.
It's, we're asking Big Brother to take care of us without chipping anything into the pile. We've done that, which I'm proud as a Canadian to say that we've done that now. The fact it took us so long, hopefully internationally they forget about this a little bit, on how we, dragged our heels and came kicking and screaming and finally said, finally we'll contribute. And now we're treating it like we did a monumental thing.
But don't you think that's because we were more of seen in the world as peacemakers? And so when it came to defense spending, it didn't really seem like that was aligned with Canadian interests because we were known kind of like as those people that would come in to do
both?
Now I think we're understanding that we need to.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that's just that mind frame that needed to change in the first place.
I think you could have done both, though. And I mean, this is a long-standing problem. So this has gone on a while that we haven't done this. But you can be a peacekeeper and still protect, it's like putting an alarm system in your house. You still want kumbaya and peace and love, but you're going to protect the fort at home, especially where we're situated. And as we talk about more about the Northern Canada more than anything we ever have. We've never talked about Northern Canada. Growing up, we never viewed that as a security threat or anything. And now we're looking at going like, we got a big area that we need to protect here. So it's something we should have done all along. And I think we could have played both roles.
And I think servicemen and women, in the military are really happy to see this, because we have such aging infrastructure and we really need to move forward. And I think if we're looking at car sectors, closing out, or we're talking about Ontario, or reskilling, retrading people that are out of work, we can look to defense industry to do that.
It's an economic driver. I get it.
Right.
But I also actually really like that part of the spending is catching people up to where they should be paid. Because if you're going to recruit people and you want to defend us,
Right.
you better be able to pay for it. And it's not just adding new jobs and new bodies and new infrastructure. It's catching those existing folks that have committed to defending us, to pay them right and to treat them right, which I'm as a Canadian, I'm proud of, because I didn't realize it's been magnified since we've had these discussions, but I didn't realize how far behind we actually were.
Right. And when you look at ammunition or different things that we could actually be doing here at home rather than buying it abroad, that's a big industry. Like that's going to be big dollars here within Canada to boost our economy.
We hope.
We will see.
We will see.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, yes, but you have to look at what's the supply chain here for this. So it's great to say, let's spend at home. And we have shipbuilding yards. We have, there's certain infrastructure we do have here. There's certain things like we're talking about partnerships with other countries on airplanes. And I think that the conversations are great to say, we're going to partner with you. We're going to build them here and you're going to help us do it. So I think there's a win for everyone as far as, working with other partners, but we can't be naive to say we're going to buy all Canadian because it's not going to happen. I mean, realistically, and that's not how we globally trade.
And I think that, from people from across the aisle, I don't think there's a lot of criticism here, right?
No.
Because we just want to see it happen.
Yeah.
And it's great that money is actually coming in.
There's no one that came out and said, this is an awful idea.
Right.
But it is, we're really as my one of my sons says, you did what you were supposed to do.
Right.
And I'm like, it's a great thing when a young adult actually thinks the same.
Absolutely. When we return, technology is changing faster than policy can keep up. And AmberMac is here to say that Canadians need to pay attention, and we'll speak with her right after the break.
You say yes, I say no on the party line, so let's go.
AmberMac is here now to break down trends shaping our future, from artificial intelligence to the digital risks most people aren't thinking about. Here's a recent clip from her show.
Meanwhile, Canada may be making some headway with OpenAI after a virtual meeting with Sam Altman, following previous meetings with senior OpenAI officials that didn't seem to accomplish really all that much. Minister of AI and Digital Innovation, Evan Solomon, said that OpenAI has agreed to a direct point of contact with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, and a commitment to better identify and review high risk user interactions with ChatGPT that could have potentially prevented the devastating Tumbler Ridge shooting.
Amber, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you. In light of the recent revelations and the rulings, do you think that the Canadian government is doing enough to hold up free speech, but also have guardrails on something that also seems like the wild, wild west at this point?
I think the Canadian government is absolutely trying to hold these tech companies accountable, specifically in this case when we look at Tumbler Ridge and the relationship that the shooter had to OpenAI using the chatbot on a regular basis. So I think the government is trying their best, but at the end of the day, let's be honest, it's really difficult to be able to hold these big tech companies accountable for their actions. They have for so many years operated with any type of guardrails in place. So I'm not sure how much headway we're going to be able to make.
Thanks, Amber. I mean, we're looking at the corporations to set the rules here. The government's going to try to do their best, but they don't really have anything to put the reins on right now. What do you think they need to do differently? Because we're looking at it and they're not going to change their way with the recent rulings with Meta and what Anthropic is doing. I mean, they're kind of throwing their hands up and it's after the fact. What does the government really need to do here? Because something's got to change.
Something absolutely does have to change. And I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that when it comes to these technology companies, what they're rolling out that Canadians are using on a regular basis are essentially just products. When we use chatbots, they're just products. When we use social media platforms, those are simply just products. And every single product that we interact with as Canadians has some type of regulation. Whether I'm getting onto an escalator or eating food or going to a movie, there are ratings, there are guardrails. We're so used to that in our society. But big tech for so many years has been able to operate without having any type of regulation whatsoever. They have a lot of power in our society. So I think the federal government really needs to be able to bravely stand up to these companies and say, hey, we actually embrace innovation, but we know at the same time, in order to have a country that can truly innovate and operate, we need to ensure that all of our citizens are safe. And that is not necessarily the case, especially with younger people when it comes to chatbots and social media.
Do you see a country that's really leading the charge in protections?
Well, I think one of the interesting things, if you follow some of these cases that have happened with some of the big tech companies, is that we can now look to regions like the EU. They are making a lot of progress right now, and they have actually for years been actually at the forefront in terms of having regulation when it comes to how companies, especially tech companies, operate within their countries. So the EU is a great place to look. We've also seen recently with countries such as Australia that more and more we're seeing these social media bans that are coming into effect to protect young people. So
Mhm.
there are people who are making moves, but Canada has for so many years known that these are issues that are real issues that are affecting Canadians, and we've been so slow to actually do anything.
My fear now is we've been so slow to do anything. The pace of change is something, I mean, from a tech perspective, this is my background, and I've never seen anything like this. As far as, a couple years ago, we're telling our kids to go be coders, and now that's probably the worst thing you could ever do. Go be a plumber, go fix pools, do something like that. How is the legislation by the time they put it in, how is that going to catch up?
Well, I think you're right. The pace of change is daunting. You know, every single day I'm working to keep up to date on everything that's
Mhm.
happening when it comes to AI and other emerging technologies, and it is overwhelmingly quick. So I think that's a real challenge that we do face. So I don't think that we have to get any of this perfect right out of the gate, but we have to do something. And I'm reminded that it was 10 years ago that I actually wrote a book about online safety for kids. So I think we have to stop pretending that these are new issues. We always have known that these big tech companies have been operating within this country and been doing whatever they wanted to do. So even if we just put some light regulation in place to get started and have that apply not only to social media platforms, but also any type of AI chatbots that are being used on a huge scale in this country, I think that would be a start. And I think it's something that would be able to help at least have a little bit of that layer of protection that I think Canadians need and, of course, want as well.
Thanks, Amber. We're going to be right back and continue the conversation. And we're looking at how innovation is transforming everyday life.
I say no on the party line, so let's go.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with AmberMac on the concerns surrounding new technology. Amber, a follow-up question. You wrote a book 10 years ago on safety. How has that aged?
Well, it has not aged that well. And, I often have deep regrets about writing this book because the title of the book was Outsmarting Your Kids Online. And it was a book that was really geared towards parents and helping parents navigate this world of social media. But what I've realized over the past few years is that it's very difficult for parents to navigate this world of social media when the tech companies have so much power to
Mhm.
influence and addict our children. So I think if I wrote that book today, it would be more focused on these big tech companies than actually telling the parents that they had to do more.
And what are your thoughts about this landmark trial and the ruling that just happened and how we move forward from there?
Well, there is some good news. And I think we did have good news just a few days ago in Los Angeles with the social media addiction trial that took place. And what the jurors said, they said that both Meta and Google were responsible for the harms that were done to a woman who's now 20 years old. She started using Instagram when she was 9 years old and YouTube when she was 6 years old. And it caused her a whole bunch of harm over the years. And the juror said that these companies had to award this woman $6 million in damages. This really is the first case that we've seen. That's why we're calling it a landmark trial, where the companies, these big tech giants, are actually being held responsible for designing sites and apps that are addictive. Things like infinite scrolling. You know, when you open up Instagram
Mhm.
and it's just nonstop scrolling,
My
that
kids
is
call it
addictive
doom
in
scrolling.
nature.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, doom scrolling, exactly. And I think one of the interesting things that's happened is that that has set a precedent. And I was just reading a report earlier today that said that there are about 1,000 cases in the U.S. Where people have the same concerns, and they're taking these big tech companies to court. And so now there's been a precedent set, and many people are saying this is like that the big tobacco moment that we saw in the 90s when all of a sudden the cigarette companies were being held responsible for the damage that cigarettes were doing. So it is good news in the sense that I think acknowledging the risks and the damage, the fact that this has taken place, I think it's good in terms of the future of safety online.
I mean, it's a great first step. The cigarettes were always cigarettes. That was the difference, is they never changed the product. They were always what they were. Whereas the algorithm and the products that tech companies come out with on a daily basis are pivoting. So there's ways around rules, and it'll be interesting to see. I do think that this is a landmark case, and there's going to be a ton to follow. But what change do you think comes out of this? What actual real change? Because they can afford $6 million is not a fine. That's buying a cup of coffee for the regular person.
It is a drop in the bucket. But when we consider that there are potentially a thousand more cases in the queue, so to speak, and thousands more around the world, I mean, it starts to get pretty damaging, not just financially, but also damaging to the reputation of these tech companies. So I think what changes that we can hope to see is that perhaps there will be some design changes in the future. And I think we don't give them as much attention to the design elements of these apps. It is true that Instagram, for example, is an app that is designed for people 13 plus. But we know that it is not necessarily appropriate for young teenagers because the elements lend themselves to young people not being able to remove themselves from all of that scrolling that takes place and potentially harmful content. So, if there were design changes, I mean, now would be the time that I think all of us would like to see them. And I do think that this trial, I think, again, puts a big spotlight on these tech companies that they haven't really had to date.
And do you have any tips? Like, I have a 14 and a 12-year-old, and it's hard because I want to give them autonomy. I want to give them trust. But when it comes to their algorithm, I am trying to see what they're watching for YouTube Shorts or what they're on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, which I dislike because everything disappears with those chats as well. And just trying to explain to them anything can be screen grabbed. It doesn't just go away because you can't see it on your end.
Well, I know we don't have too much time left, so I will just say something really simple in terms of advice for parents. I would really focus, I have a teenager at home as well, on encouraging the young person in your house to be more of a creator when it comes to technology. Learn how to use tech to be creative, to build things versus to be someone who is just consuming that technology. So those are two very different things. And if you can guide your kid down that path of creation, I think it's a much healthier relationship.
Well, I appreciate your time today. You're always at the innovative part of what's breaking in the news, and so we appreciate you coming on to explain all these complex issues. And we'd love to have you back in the future if you're available.
I am happy to come back anytime, and it's great to chat with you both. And thank you so much. I mean, these conversations, I think we don't have them enough. So I really appreciate your time.
Yes, I say no on the party line, so let's go.
Bob Canoe is facing pushback over remarks that are drawing strong reaction. Here's what he said.
Let the Epstein class fight the Epstein war. Not a single Canadian should ever be put in harm's way to try and defend Donald Trump's foolish Iranian war. And I'll go a step further, and I'll say no American either. No American child from the blue collar or the middle class should have to die in Iran. Let the Epstein class fight the Epstein war.
Well, we have a premier pretending to be a prime minister. And he did it only in English, just to be clear. So with all the bounce back, all the pushback on the CEO of Air Canada this week. What do you think? Why should he be saying what he said?
I think he's saying the things that we're all thinking, right?
Is it his job?
Well, maybe because somebody has to say it, and I think many people probably felt in line with that. Like, why are we fighting wars that we didn't decide that we wanted to take part in?
So let's just say 50% of the premiers are for it, 50 are against it. So we're just gonna go at it that way.
That's not even how I looked at it. I looked at it as that he's saying the things that people aren't by saying.
People?
When he's talking about the Epstein class, right?
Okay.
And he's talking about that administration, the American administration, right? They brought us into this war, and a lot of people are saying this war is a distraction because that is a thing in the news where it comes to the court cases, where it comes to nobody actually having any accountability. You see other countries, princes losing titles, all these things that are happening, but you don't see anything happening in America, and yet they are just invading Venezuela. Now they're having a war in Iran.
I mean, his
and
comment
he's
though
saying
about
our kids shouldn't fight these wars, meaning Canadians shouldn't be drawn into it
and we are
either.
right now.
And that's why he ended by saying even Americans shouldn't.
That's not his call. And that's not his job. His job is to worry about healthcare, his economy in the province, not to criticize the American
But
government.
he has a platform.
calls
Shouldn't he use that
but
platform
that's not his job.
to bring attention?
But that's not what we do. Then we're talking on behalf internationally. Well, we shouldn't be. We should have the prime minister who's supposed to speak for us. It's going to cause more issues. You're poking the bear once again.
I agree
The
with
Epstein
that.
comment to me just derails it as even valid at this point. It's election speak and politician speak. It's not. I mean, you keep calling him the Epstein class. He must have said it 2 or 3 times in that clip. So, A, I don't believe he should be saying it, and B, I mean, what are you going to get out of it? What's the positive that can come out of that?
To say this is an unlawful war, and we don't want to be drawn into it as Canadians, and it really is not something that wasn't gone through NATO, didn't go through the UN. It's not something that
But
us
we're not
as
in the war right now.
Canadians.
So he's talking about Americans shouldn't be in this war either. That's not his business. His business is we're worried about Manitoba. and worrying about his economy and worrying about healthcare and the residents of Manitoba. Well, for the betterment of our country.
So you
But
don't think premiers can speak to anything
I
that's
don't think you
happening in the
attack
States?
the gentleman that we're supposed to be having. We're trying to bridge build right now, and we continue to shoot ourselves in our own foot. There's nothing positive that can come out of this. What positive can come out of this? You're frustrated. There's a lot of things you can say.
Right. Okay. Well, finally, on a lighter moment, we're going to look at what Ontario Premier Doug Ford is getting the attention online when he's dealing with Mark Carney and a presser that dealt with water.
Oh, Chris. I almost drank your water. Did you have a sip of that?
I didn't touch it.
Okay, I'll take a sip. This isn't going to turn me into a liberal, is it? I've already been accused of being a liberal. Okay, sir. Well, they do accuse me. But anyways, here we go. Sorry.
Well, Jeff, do you want a sip of my water?
I'll drink your water any day if I'm thirsty, especially like today. I think it was, you know what, everything's so serious in life. And I just thought it was a great moment where, you know, it's a joke. Obviously, people are saying he dodged the question. Sure, people dodge questions all the time. He took a sip of water. It was he was going to take a sip of water. It was a funny moment. Sometimes we have to laugh in life. If we, you know, everything's so serious. I thought this was a nice moment.
I like this dynamic duo. I think that they usually have levity whenever you see Mark Carney and Doug Ford together, whether or not it's during a leadership election or whether it's during an election, to kind of sit down and have a meal together and to make big things happen, you know, within Canada, Ontario, and announcing, you know, funding like we just saw with the housing that just happened. So anyways, I really enjoyed it.
Well, another interesting week on the party lines. A lot going on. Sometimes very serious, sometimes not so serious as you just saw. And we'll be back with more next week.
With an